Ark is a really weird word in English. Hi everyone, this is R.A. Sweeney. Welcome to Wordplay in the Word. Today I want to talk about the word ark because it gets used in some really weird ways, in the Bible at least, and it really doesn't get used anywhere else, at least in this same way. So we're talking about ark, A-R-K, not A-R-C if you're learning geometry or anything like that. But it's a boat typically, or some sort of like container vessel sort of thing, which, like I said, it's not a normal word in English. It's actually not an English word really. It's coming from a Latin word that just became Anglicized. And so the first place we see it is in Noah's story. So in English, we see that Noah is told to build an ark. And we kind of all just accepted like, oh yeah, he's building an ark. Sure. None of us had ever used the word ark before, I can almost guarantee, because it's a weird word. And so we see it all throughout that story. We see it in references back to the Noah story. But Noah is one of the main places we see ark. And then the other place that we see ark is the Ark of the Covenant, or the Ark of God, depending on where you're at in the story. And there's some really interesting stuff with why it's sometimes called the Ark of the Covenant and why it's sometimes called the Ark of God. But we'll have to get into that a different time. And so those are really the only places that the word ark is ever used. I can't think of a single time off the top of my head where ark is used just in any other context. I mean, it's those two things are the only places it comes up. And what's really interesting is they're not the same word, not the same idea in the original languages. And so I'm saying original languages because they use different words from different languages for the two places here. So let's start with the Ark of the Covenant. So in that case, it uses a Hebrew word, and it is Aaron. And it really just means box. When I'm translating the word Aaron, I typically will just go with box because that's really all it is. And when you think about what the Ark of the Covenant is, it's a beautiful box. It is an important box. And so I kind of don't like the word box because it seems to make it seem a bit more common. So I kind of like that we call it the Ark just to make it seem like this isn't just any old box. It's not like they had a used Amazon box that they just threw some stuff in to go, throw it in this back room. It is a very important box. God dwells on top of it, but the word means box. And so that's the word that we're seeing over there, and it's just box. Box, when it got translated into Latin, I'm not great with Latin, but the basic, like the root of the Latin word was ark. It's like arkon or something like that. And so that's where it kind of went from. It was the Hebrew word for box, Aaron, went either to Greek and then Latin, or just straight to Latin, I'm not sure. But it became arkon in Latin, and then from there it just got turned into ark in English. And so that's kind of where the word developed from, is just this word for box. So Aaron in Hebrew, arkon, or whatever it is in Latin, both just mean box. And so if I'm going to follow that train into English, ark should just mean box. And so then we see our own used in different places as a box. And then to back it up to the Noah story, it's interesting because the word there is not a Hebrew word, it's an Egyptian word, and it is teva. And I kind of, if you learn Spanish and you kind of like smoosh your B and your V sounds together, you've got the same thing here. So if you're hearing teba and teva, I'm in the middle. But the word is teva in Egyptian that we use in the Noah's Ark story, which is weird because at that point, the Tower of Babel story hasn't even happened. So like, why are we using different words? Anyway, and so I translate the word teva as casket. Because it typically gets used in two different ways. One is a coffin. So you would put dead bodies in a teva. So you could call it a coffin, but a casket is another English word for a coffin. And then the other thing is it's like a storage box, like a lockbox for your household idols or your religious relics, kind of like the Ark of the Covenant gets used. And so you'd think that it would be called a teva, which is really interesting there for a lot of different reasons as well. But it's that storage box for your religiously important objects, specifically your idols. And so in that case, a strong lockbox in English can also be a casket. So I really like calling it Noah's casket. I think casket carries the ideas of what teva can mean in both senses of what it can mean. And so when you think about like the Noah story, I just saw a video recently where this guy's freaking out because, oh, well, there was no rudder in Noah's teva. And one, like, there could have been. It doesn't say there wasn't. It just doesn't talk about it. It doesn't talk about lots of different things. But two, like, nowhere does it say it was a boat. It's not a boat. It's a coffin. It's a casket. So in that story, he's not meant to like go on a voyage somewhere. He's meant to build this floating box to store life in. It's I always refer to it as a seed of Eden. You've got humanity, you've got the animals, you've got the plants, and it is meant to pass through the chaos waters, and then it lands on a high mountain, which Eden was on a high mountain, and so it lands, and then Noah gets out and he plants a garden. Like, it's preserving this encapsulated, foundation of Eden that would then go get planted and turn into a new Garden of Eden was the idea. And so it's not a boat, it's a seed more than anything. And Jesus talks about, or in the New Testament at least, it talks about how if a seed doesn't die and fall, it can't sprout up into something new. And so you've got this seed that goes through the waters of death, and then gets planted on a high mountain and starts into new life there. And so that's not the only time we see that, though. The other time that we see teva, and if I remember, it's the only other time we see teva, is in the Moses story, where he gets put in the basket and put in the water. And there, the basket is called a teva. So the weird thing is, there we've got two uses of teva. We call it an ark and a basket. And then we've got the Ark of God, which we call an ark, but it's an aron, not a teva. And so I really don't like the way this has gotten translated, because I feel like it is less clear than it would be in the original languages, and I feel like it was a missed opportunity to have some consistency in language, or some show the differences in language, and it would maybe make things a bit clearer. But it's interesting when you think of that, because there you've got life is put in a plant material box that is covered in pitch. Like, there's a lot of similar language in their construction. It's put in the waters in order to preserve life through the waters and then sprout up into something big. Like, there's a lot of similarities, and so it makes sense. And so you've got both of those. The other cool thing with teva is if you spell it backwards, it's habayit, which is the Hebrew word for the house. And so you see Noah goes in the teva, and then a few chapters later, you see kind of the mirror image in the Sodom and Gomorrah story, where it is the next place that rain is mentioned. It's raining fire, not water, but it's the next place rain is mentioned. There's a flood of vengeance going on. God is rescuing out a man with his wife and his children and their spouses. Like, it's meant to be this mirror image. And Noah found rescue in the teva. And at the beginning of that story, when the judgment's coming, Lot's outside the house, and the messengers of God reach out and pull him back into the house, as opposed to the hand of God closing the door of the ark. You've got the hand is bringing safety, but they pull him back into the house, which is teva spelled backwards. So it's a backward ark. The story's kind of mirrored and inverted, but it kind of, shows this parallel between the two. And then in the Moses story, you've got, he goes into a teva when he's an infant, And then later, he and all the other believers in God go into the house that is painted with blood on the door in order to find protection there. And so you've got parallels in both of those stories of the Teba is like the house. And while you're in this Teba in the middle of the stormy waters, you're supposed to be envisioning like a Passover meal, which is where Psalm's getting its "you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy." Like, so many cool connections once you start seeing all of that and how it plays together. But anyway, that's what I wanted to really focus on, because I feel like it is a confusing wordplay. It's one of my least favorite because I feel like it confuses some really cool ideas there. But we've got Teba, which is what Noah and Moses went in. We have Aaron, which is like the box that carries the tablets of the testimony, and God sits above. And then weird, sometimes it gets translated as ark, sometimes Moses it's basket, which basket's a really weird choice. But anyway, that's how all of those go together. One last thing I forgot to mention. I think too that the Noah story is meant to be foreshadowing the Moses story by using an Egyptian word. And so you have in Noah, you're like, why are we speaking Egyptian here? And then when you get to the story in Egypt, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense why we're using Egyptian here. And so that kind of carries it over. And then when you get to the Aaron, the box that the Ark of the Covenant, they have just left Egypt. And so it's not surprising that they would leave Egyptian behind when they're leaving Egypt, that God's not going to be associated with the Teva. He's going to be associated with the Hebrew equivalent. So just some interesting word things going on with all of that between the different languages and how it all gets translated. So I wanted to share that. I hope it is a blessing, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.